As I mentioned, we're about to go on a view. The purpose of a view is to see some of the locations about which there will be testimony during the course of the trial. What you observe on the view is as much evidence as the testimony of witnesses and the exhibits presented for your consideration during the course of the trial. So it's extremely important that you pay close attention to what it is that can be seen on the view. There are a few things you are not allowed to do on the view. You may not ask questions of counsel, me, or anyone else. If you have any questions about different things, where to go or issues like that, please talk to one of the court officers who will be out there. You cannot discuss with anyone, even among yourselves, your observations on the view until you have retired for your deliberations at the end of the case. You may not take any measurements or pace off any distances, nor make any notes at the scene. And lastly, as I said earlier, you may not revisit the scene on your own during the trial. I'm not going to foreclose people from going down Loudon Road, for example, if your travels would ordinarily take you there. But again, don't go to any of those locations specifically for doing some further analysis or research on your own on the case. Because we'll be outside, I'm going to ask you to keep together as much as possible so that when counsel are speaking, you'll be able to hear what they're saying. And if there are places where we need to do it in a couple of different groups, counsel will let you know and we'll set it up that way. But I want to make sure that you're able to hear what counsel are saying while we're out there. And now we'll have some brief preview statements from counsel. Attorney Olberding.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, members of the jury. My name is Ryan Olberding. We've been introduced a few times now, but I've also got my co-counsel here with me, Meg Hageman and Josh Beischer. Together, we represent the people and as the citizens of the state of New Hampshire. Now, as jurors, most of what you're doing during the course of this trial is going to take place right here in the courtroom, as you've probably surmised. This is where you'll see and hear most of the evidence in this case. And then you're going to listen to closing arguments and the judge's instructions on the law. In a few moments, however, you're going to go on what's called a view. A view is just that. It's an opportunity for you to view the evidence that we can't bring into the courtroom. Since we can't bring this evidence into the courtroom, we're going to take you to the evidence. Keep in mind that what you see during the view is actually evidence. It's evidence that you can and should consider during your deliberations. And it's just like all the other evidence in this case. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what you're going to see and what you're going to do. When you leave here, you're going to board a bus outside of the courthouse. You're going to travel east down Loudon Road right here in Concord. And in some ways, by getting on that bus, you're going to begin a journey you'll likely never forget. You're going to see some of the key locations in this case, and you're going to retrace some of the last walk that was taken by Stephen and Jaswindi Reed. Referring to this large overhead map, we're going to start at the Shaw's parking lot. You can see down here, Loudon Road. You're going to be taking a bus down Loudon Road. That bus is going to pull into the front parking lot of the Shaw's supermarket. You're going to stop there briefly, not disembark the bus, but the importance of you stopping there is that we would like you to notice the relation of the Shaw's supermarket parking lot with the rest of the locations you're going to be visiting. Notice the relationship while you're in that parking lot to the clearing, and I would point this out, the clearing and the power lines right across the street. Also notice the relationship of that parking lot in relation to the Alton Woods apartment complex and a clearing across from Alton Woods, a location you'll be stopping at, following stopping briefly at the Shaw's supermarket parking lot. The defendant's path from Shaw's on Monday afternoon, April 18th, took him from Shaw's through that parking lot, across Loudon Road, and underneath the power lines. So notice the proximity of those locations to each other. In the clearing near the Alton Woods apartment complex and the power lines, that will be your next stop. Following that stop at Shaw's, you're going to be stopping there briefly and actually getting off the bus. We're going to ask while you're there to notice the relationship of that location to the Shaw's supermarket. While you're there, you're also going to be given the perspective of the location surrounding the Alton Woods apartment complex. This is, of course, where Stephen and just when you resided. And also while you're there, you're going to have the context to know that this is where police began searching for them in both within the complex and in the surrounding areas. This will also provide you with perspective on the location where police located just in the wood line beyond this clearing, Arthur Kelly, the man identifying himself as Arthur Kelly, that is the defendant Logan Clegg, on Wednesday, April 20th, the initial evening of the search. And lastly, at that stop, we're going to point out the beginning of a trail that runs from Alton Woods down near 393 to an underpass on Portsmouth Street that goes to the Portsmouth Street trailhead where the Marsh Loop trailhead is originally located, right off of Portsmouth Street. This is likely the path that Stephen and Wendy Reed would have taken to begin what would have been their last walk that Monday afternoon on April 18th. Now, as you travel out of the apartment complex, you're going to be traveling on a road that will take you back out to Loudon Road. You're going to drive by Building 14. I ask you notice Building 14. That's the location of where Stephen and just Wendy Reed's apartment was located as well. Now, following this brief stop at Alton Woods in the clearing here, you're going to be taken by an indirect route ultimately to the Marsh Loop trailhead on a bus, and ultimately you're going to be driven slightly up into the power lines here to a point almost near the wood line where you'll be able to disembark. What you're going to want to keep in mind while you're out there is the way the area looks right now is actually very different than the way it looked back in April of 2022. The power company has constructed some roads out there to allow heavy equipment access. They're doing some various construction projects out there. But the good news is that we're going to be able to access these roads for purposes of traveling closer than we would have been otherwise, to the point where the Marsh Loop Trail actually enters the wood line. And these roads will also allow you to be picked up at the end of our walk without having to retrace your steps back. So we'll be disembarking at the wood line and traveling in, and we'll be picked up later on down near the Profile Avenue Connector Trail by the bus. So you won't have to retrace your steps, but you will be retracing the last steps of Stephen and Wendy Reed as you travel down that path. Keep in mind this area is going to be a little bit different and maybe more different in different locations as it was in April of 2022. Small rocks, leaves, sticks, foliage obviously change over time. That's just some things to keep in mind. Also, just be aware of just some of the typical hazards associated with hiking, wildlife, tree roots, rocks, branches near the trails. As you travel down the trail, notice the difference in elevation on the trail. On the left side of the trail, as you enter the wood line, you're going to notice a steep increase in elevation up to where the power lines are located. And you're going to notice a gradual downhill slope on the right side of the trail, the east side of the trail. I also ask you, notice your vantage point too as you're walking down the trail. This is a little bit different than just a casual hike through the woods where you not be focused on anything in particular. As you're walking down the trail, notice what your vantage point is like when you're focused on what's on the trail versus whether you're looking off to the right side of the trail or the left side of the trail. Now, as we go down the Marsh Loop Trail, about the midpoint of the trail, we'll stop and we're going to identify the area that's appears to be, based on the evidence, the crime scene in this case. While we're there, we're going to point out some specific locations of note that are going to come up during the trial. We're going to point out both marked trees. These trees that are numbered actually have markers placed on them by the Concord Police. We'll point those out to you so you can establish those trees as reference points in your mind for some of the discussion during the case. And they've tried to make it as simple as possible for us. Tree 1's marked with a 1, 2 with a 2, and so on. So we'll point those numbers out to you while you're on the scene. We'll also point out some additional areas of note. While we're out there, we're going to point out the vicinity on the trail where a bullet fragment was recovered, approximately in this area. We're also going to point out where the casings were recovered on May 20th as well in this vicinity. We're also going to point out where drops of blood were also located as well. Following the review of the scene on the trail area, we'll move towards a location that's approximately 30 meters off the trail, right around what's going to be marked as tree number 5. And that location is a depression, almost a natural depression behind this tree, and that's the location where Stephen and Swindy Reed's bodies were located, and where they were located, they were covered with woodland debris. As we make our way down what was believed to be the suspected drag path of the bodies, we're going to point out the trees marked for reference, and we're also going to point out a location where we believe a piece of fabric was ripped off of Wendy's clothing as her body was dragged down here in the vicinity of tree number 4. As you view this area, consider, as you would from the trail, as you approach the location, whether it would be likely you would notice anything off to either side of the trail. And again, notice the vantage point that you have when your attention is focused ahead on the trail, as opposed to when your attention is focused off to the side of the trail. After you've familiarized yourself with these areas, we will continue north along the Marsh Loop Trail and west along to what's referred to as the Profile Avenue connector back towards the power lines. Just for reference, we'll plan on walking up here and over here on the Profile Avenue connector. As we get to this location on the Profile Avenue connector trail, we're going to point out some landmarks for you as well. We're going to point out along this trail there's a rock that's referred to as a reference point. We're also going to point out 2 marked trees, just as in the other location. There are 2 marked trees marked with numbers by the Concord Police that will be reference point as well to point out the site where the various burnt objects were recovered, what's been referred to and will be continued to referred to throughout the trial as the burnt tent site. While we're there, we're also going to point out where some casings were found that were found to have been fired from the gun that was found in the defendant's possession. Now notice the proximity of this location while you're there to the Marsh Loop Trail, to the recovery location of the bodies, and ultimately to the Profile Avenue connector and to the Shaws. We want you to kind of keep all these locations and their relative proximities in mind. Now, just want to point out, this is ultimately, the reason we're doing this is your view. This is for you to take in the evidence and allow you to create a mental picture of these areas that you'll be able to carry out with you throughout the trial. As the witnesses testify about these various locations, you're going to be able to use those mental pictures as you consider the testimony to have a better understanding of what the evidence actually is in this case. And lastly, as the judge noted, keep in mind this view is as formal a part of the trial as the proceedings that are taking place right here in the courtroom. For that reason, during the view, we're not going to be able to talk to you, answer any questions you have, or just even discuss things informally. Please don't think that we're being rude. We're just following the rules. All we can ask of you is that you take this opportunity to view this evidence carefully and completely. Consider what you see in context with all the other evidence that you will see and hear in this courtroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Olberding. Attorney Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. It's actually a pretty cool part of the trial because you are there. And what happens is you start this trial there in the places of interest so that when a witness testifies, you place it in the appropriate place in your head. And so it's yours. You take the amount of time that you need to get it into your head, to see things and to figure out a sense of distance. Now, the judge told you you can't measure, you can't even, sort of take the steps to say this was about 15 steps or something like that. But as you walk along, you can get a sense. And when a witness says it wasn't far away, you think, well, actually, maybe it was. And if a witness says it was just a short distance, you can think, well, yeah, maybe that was short. So you are actually the evidence. What's in your head becomes part of the evidence. Timing. Nobody is going to be walking around with a watch saying, okay, it took me this long to get here. But through the perspective of distances, you can get a sense of timing. We're not going to be with you at Shaw's, but from Shaw's, you just take a look. Take a look at the parking lot, how big it is, and the movements from the parking lot to the crosswalk, where there's a light, where somebody would be at the crosswalk. And then you're going to pull into an area not far from the crosswalk to be able to look at this area that is sort of a field between the Alton Woods complex and the woods. And you're not going to be walking the trail that's there, but you should take a minute and consider the distance between the sidewalk and the overpass. From the overpass, because you're not walking it, you can see that there's a jag that goes to the overpass, under the overpass, and then to Portsmouth Street. So you won't be able to get the perspective of that walk, but you will have a perspective of how long that field is. When you go to Alton Woods, you'll see that road that I talked about in opening that was not only the staging area, but led to the area where one of the detectives identified a guy who called himself Arthur Kelly. Just again, you want to get an idea, how big is this space, how small is this space, so that when somebody talks about that, it fits in to what you already know before the witness testifies. Then we get to Portsmouth Street. We'll stop there, or pause, one of the two. And you've heard that the power line trail has changed. But you still get a perspective of the power line, how wide it is, other dirt trails that might be in there, how long it goes. There's a brand new road there, so you'll have to rely on pictures to know what it looked like then, but you can rely on yourselves to figure out that sense of distance, how uphill, the incline that it is it uphill, is it flat, is it in brush, is it in woods? You will get that perspective. From that, again, you do not measure from Portsmouth to when March Loop Trail goes into the woods, nor where other trails may continue on the power line. You'll get pictures that you can use your view to put it in perspective. Then we'll go to that area, tree number 1. You're going to take time to walk around tree number 1. And I want you specifically from tree number 1 to look at the slant right around the tree. I want you to look at the slant on the left side of the trail as you're walking north, slant on the right side of the trail as you're walking north, how thick or scraggly the trees and the brush are. And then we're going to go, take your time. We're going to go down that, what was the drag trail that you've heard about. And what I want you to do before you go down the drag trail is take a look from the trail and see, what can I see down that way? What is visible? What is hidden? And then, as you go to the trail, I want you to stop a couple of times and think, okay, can I see the path? Can the path see me? Get that into perspective. The sounds that are in the woods, the feel that is in the woods, keep all of that in mind while you're walking through the woods. Then you'll go a little bit north of that area, and I'll point out a stump. And just keep in mind, not a timing, not a feet, not a distance, but how far away from tree number 1 does this stump? Is it close? Is it far? And then we'll go to an intersection and turn left on the intersection to go to the area that you've heard about with the tent that's just off the power line up there. And I believe the bus will be on the power line. When you go to the, look around that area where the tent was, where that clearing, makeshift sort of clearing, and then get onto the power line. Before you get on the bus, I want you to stop, and I want you to look south on the power line. And just, again, get the perspective for distance with ease of access from where you are. What is a route to where you are as you stand on the power lines? And all that, as witnesses testify, bit by bit, it falls into place. You may not remember it all. that's fine, because we'll be having pictures and everything else to assist you, but it just seems like being there is really, really important to anybody understanding all this evidence. So we'll talk to you while you're there, and point out very specific things, and that's all we'll be talking to you about, is to point at, you are the ones that decide exactly what you're gonna look at, exactly what you're gonna try and get into your mind. It's yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Smith. So, members of the jury, you can now go to the deliberation room. You'll be given guidance about when and how to board the bus. Thank you.